Have you ever wondered about these dots and strings moving before your eyes? They're debris in your eye doctors say. They're your own structured light of consciousness, we say. Want to know who's right? Stay tuned. In this series, we take a closer look at one particular type of floaters, namely the shining structure floaters. In ophthalmological studies, they're sometimes described as harmless or idiopathic, transparent or translucent dots and strings. We will ask some inconvenient questions for ophthalmology to show that these floaters are rather a consciousness phenomenon than vitreous opacities. The question in this episode is, if floaters are particles floating in the vitreous body, why do we keep seeing the same dots and strings? When I started looking at my shining structure floaters, I soon became acquainted with them. I recognized them by the places in my visual field where they are located and by the constellations they are in. Sure, through vigorous eye movements, I can change the relative positions of the dots and strings to one another, but only temporarily. Soon they take their starting position again. So basically, I've been seeing the exact same spheres and strings for decades. Why is that? The physiological answer is that floaters don't float freely in the vitreous humor. Although the vitreous humor consists primarily of water, this water is bound in a network of collagen fibers and hyaluronic acid. So the vitreous humor is basically a jelly-like mass, and floaters are like particles embedded in this mass. Particles in a viscous mass hardly move. They move primarily when the entire mass is moved. In the case of the vitreous humor, this naturally happens through eye movement. Does this explain why I see the same floaters over and over again? If that were the whole story, then I would expect my floaters to move rapidly when I move my eyes, but then slow down and come to a standstill quickly, just like in this ultrasound recording of floaters. That's not what I'm observing, though. My floaters do move very quickly, but they continue to move, even when my eyes are still. Their movement is similar to that of the floaters shown in this video of a scanning laser ophthalmoscopy. Here it looks as if these floaters are not stuck in a gel, but are floating quite freely in an aqueous liquid. Now, an ophthalmologist would explain to me that this makes perfect sense, because as is known, the vitreous humor liquefies over the course of a lifetime. The collagen and hyaluronic acid begin to separate, resulting in collagen condensation in some places and liquefaction in others. Yes, that might explain the movements of my floaters. But what we also see in this video is that floaters, when they move freely, are constantly rearranged with every eye movement always forming new configurations. I might be able to recognize individual threads, but it would be virtually impossible to see the same arrangements of threads and dots that seem unconnected to each other repeatedly and over years. What is it now? Are floaters part of a jelly-like network that would explain why they maintain their relative positions despite eye movements? Or are they collagen or other structures floating in the aqueous fluid of lacuna, the liquefied areas of the vitreous humor, which would explain their relatively rapid movement and their subsequent floating due to inertia after the eye movements have stopped? One could argue that both are true. While floaters do swim in lacunae, they are still part of the existing collagen network. That is, they are only partially detached, like extensions that reach into the liquefied parts and move rapidly there. In that case, however, they would have to be connected to the network at least at some point. That's conceivable. But there is no physiological proof at this time. In the SLO video, for example, the floater strings don't seem to be attached to a larger network. What I see doesn't support this thesis either. Some of my strings extend beyond my field of vision, and they might be connected to larger structures. With other strings, and especially with the dots, I see no connection to other strings. Yes, my seeing may be limited. The same applies to physiological theories on eye floaters. The question for the next episode will be, why do floaters sink? And what do you think? Do you think your floaters are just debris in UI? Or could there be something more to it? Let me know in the comments.